book. It is at the front table there with Peter.
You can't just take a free copy. Because they're not free.
So I'm going to introduce our two main speakers tonight, and who have contributed a lot to this book and to the issue. So first of all, right beside me, a lot of you know her in this room. It's Cindy Hanson. And yay, Cindy! So Cindy is one of the authors of the book that was published earlier this year. She teaches adult education at the University of Regina, and from 2016 to 2018 was the president of the Canadian Research Institute for the Advancement of Women, or also known as CREA for its acronym. She became involved with the Prairie School for Union Women by conducting participatory research with past participants of the school. And the results of that research were shared with the school, with the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour, and it received the Phyllis Cunningham Award for Social Justice. So that research, I think, was one of the things that sparked the idea of let's do a book. In addition to her academic credentials, Cindy is a well-known feminist and social justice activist here in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, and many of you will know her as one of the key spokespersons for the Save the STC campaign. So not only is she a thinker, she's definitely a doer. And so the second person, Barb Byers. She's a well-known advocate of working people. She's been active in the labor movement for
A long time.
She's a feminist. She's an inspiring speaker, inspirational speaker. I almost sound like aspiring speaker. No, you're an inspirational speaker and a champion on social justice issues. Most of you will remember her as the feisty, past president of the SFL. I have a little bit of alliteration here. I didn't read this out loud when I wrote it. Feisty, past president of the SFL.
I like to say fat president. Well, I'm a little heavier than I want to be, but
so it's a position she held from 1988 to 2002. So that was during the Grant Devine years, as well as the beginning of the Romano government. As president of the SFL, she was one of the founding members of the Prairie School for Union Women, and very critical to its success. I'm convinced that the school would not have got off the ground without Barb's political capital and making sure that it happened. In 2002, she left Saskatchewan to serve as one of the Canadian Labour Congress's executive vice presidents, and then she was the secretary-treasurer for the CLC from 2014 to 2017. At the CLC, her roles included education and equality issues, and she was a driving force on improving the Labour College of Canada and promoting women's equality in the union movement and beyond. One important initiative that's worth mentioning is a national survey a number of years ago. I don't know if you remember it, and it was a survey about violence against women and work and the workplace. And that study really had a huge impact across Canada. It spurred a national dialogue, and now we have national and provincial legislation, and I think in every province now, that for employment leaves for women who are dealing with domestic violence. So a very critical initiative that she, I think, played a very big part in. And in 2015, she was named a member of the Order of Canada. She and her partner... Woo! She and her partner Jerry returned to Regina in 2017 after she finished her term at the CLC, and she hasn't stopped moving. She's continued to be very active now that she's back home. I am Cheryl Stadnichuk, and I'm soon to be the former researcher for CUPE. I retire on June 1st, so that's why I say soon. I have a strong connection to many of the stories in the book, and when I read it, I found myself reminiscing and being inspired by the writers. I was at the founding meetings of the Prairie School for Union Women way back in the basement of the Union Center in Regina. And then there's a chapter in the book about the wall, and you've seen probably the slides that are going for the wall that Suzanne George and Bev Burke were involved in. I was at the CUPE conference where that was started. And then I was visiting a friend in Nicaragua who works with working and unemployed women, and they have adapted the wall, and they're using it in Spanish to use it for training women. So as I was reading the book, I was saying, oh my God, I know about that, and I remember that. And I also did work on developing a week-long women's union leadership course with former colleague of mine, Beth Smiley, who you may know as well, in Saskatchewan. Sorry. So a lot of the stories it was really wonderful to read, and it was inspiring to hear how much connection there is between all of the movements for women-only union education. So what is the book? We're here to launch this little small but powerful book. It's a small book, but it's packed with great information and stories. This is the third launch. Last week there was a launch in Ottawa, and at the end of April there was the first launch was held in Regina. So I'm sorry to tell Saskatoon people that in this situation, Regina was number one.
Don't do that, Cheryl.
But there's going to be more launches. There's going to be a launch in Winnipeg and in Toronto as well. So it's a little book that could. It's a little book, but it's having a lot of impact across Canada. So there are 10 chapters in the book, and they all provide insight into women-only union education. Many of the chapters focus on the Prairie School for Union Women. Is there anyone in this room who actually participated at the Prairie School for Union Women? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, nice. So there's a lot of focus on that, but there's also a lot of stories about other kinds of union, women's union education. There's 2 chapters from the United States. There are some chapters that deal with women-only education courses in 2 unions, CUPE National and the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. But the book also has some specific discussion on content. There's a chapter on union women on Turtle Island, one on LGBTQ education in unions, and then a story about the wall methodology. And it ends with a very thoughtful love letter to the Prairie School for Union Women from the co-authors Cindy Hanson and Adrienne Pavo. So that's kind of a short summary of what the book is about, and it's going to have different meaning for everybody, I think, as you read through the different chapters. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions to Cindy and Barb, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience, any discussions you have. So my first question is, the focus of this book is women-only union education. There are examples from Saskatchewan, from various unions from the United States. And we know that there are other examples not included, such as the Union Women's Institute in the Pacific Northwest. But my question to Barb, I'll start with Barb first, is so why women-only education within the union movement? Why has this been so important?
Okay, I don't get to do a Fidel Castro speech for 12 hours on why this is important. Right? Sort of not be transformational learning necessarily. So why is it important? Well, because we need still, and have always needed, and I think we're going to need for a long time, safe spaces for women to have discussions. And we need to be able to do that without apologizing to our brothers, that we need that space. I mean, that's the reality. And and we need, as women, we also need to remember that there will be other groups that will say the same thing, that we need those that they need those safe spaces, and we have to be respectful of that. So why do we need it? We need, I think I'm going to give you just an example of, from my history, because it's actually, you did say, I've been involved for a long time. This year is my 40th anniversary from when I first became involved in my union, and as one of my friends who had been involved in unions many years before said, but when you first came in, you didn't know how to spell the word union. So, the Canadian Labour Congress for years had women's conferences. They haven't had one for a long time, which is another whole discussion. But, and at those women's conferences, men used to come to the conference, and they were, in most cases, they were well-meaning men. And they would come and they would say, well, we want to come to the women's conference because we want to learn how to be, to support women better, and we want to learn how to be allies, and we promise not to dominate the conversation. And they would come to the conferences, and you know this punchline on this, right? They didn't listen, they mansplained, and they weren't better allies, and they did dominate the conversation. And so for years, the CLC Women's Committee struggled with, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with this? Because we weren't at the point where we could have a women's only conference, you know? And at one point we thought, well, because women said, look, I'm going to say different things when men are in the room because it just doesn't feel the same. So, so for years we would go back and forth and say, well, you know, should we have it so that women indicate on their forum whether they would only like to be in a woman's only workshop and that sort of stuff. And then finally we had this brilliant idea. We said, no, we're not going to do that. Men will be welcome at the conference, they will be welcome to come to the plenaries, and when it comes time for the workshops, the men will go into a men's only workshop to learn how to be better allies, and to learn how to support, and all of those other sorts of things. And the first year we did it, we almost had a revolt, because we had people saying that was discriminatory and all the things you hear now. And we had some women that ran to the defense of the men and said, oh, this is awful, you can't do this to our brothers. And, but we lived through that first experience. And the second time we did it, it was actually here in Saskatoon. And there was, the men went into their men's only workshop with 2 male facilitators to learn how to be better allies. And it was actually very successful. But the interesting thing was, for some reason, when it was understood that when men were welcome to come to the conference, but they would not be in the same workshops as the women, men quit applying. Now, I don't know, you could give me the explanation for this. So why is it important to have women-only conferences? Because there is a different conversation. And that's the reality, is it is a different approach. It's different than what we're going to say otherwise. I think there's also some tough issues that women need to struggle with together. You know, we need to have some big discussions about where we're at on some things, and it is a different discussion if we don't have that space for women to be able to have that debate and work it through. And so I'm sorry if that's longer than you expected, but we didn't rehearse this, you see. But that is, from my perspective, it's like when people say, well, why do you need a women's committee? Aren't we all part of the union movement? Well, we need a women's committee because, quite frankly, we don't have equality yet. And we still are judged differently because of the sound of our voices, what we wear, how we look, all that sort of stuff. And it's this, I want to put out a caution as well for all of the women that are in the room, that we need to be respectful then when other equity groups ask for the same and need the same issue. And I'll give the follow-up on my story is this. Several years later, we're going to go ahead into whatever the late 90s, the CLC is having a women's conference. And this was when we were getting into including younger workers. And we were really into, let's hear what younger workers have to say. So we decided we would make a special effort to have younger workers. But younger workers were going to be able to have their own workshop because they were going to be able to, again, express what they wanted. There were, the workshop happened, there was a couple of mistakes early on where people's age wasn't determined, and so some older women got into the workshop that were aged out, if I can put it gently. And so we had a young woman from the SFL that was in the workshop, and she came in afterwards and she said to me, Barb, she said, Barb, they came in the CLC, tried to be really nice, and they tried to be great, and they said, oh, we're just going to move you 4 women into another workshop because this is for young women to have the discussion. And the older women said, well, no, we want to stay because we want to learn how to support and we want to be better allies. And we promise not to dominate the conversation. And guess what they did? So I would say to every one of the sisters that's here, we have a responsibility in this transformational learning is to not repeat what's already happened to us, to make sure that what we're doing is continuing to open up that safe space.